So let's jump into the meat and potatoes here. And let's talk about making this career pivot. Okay. I'm calling this NGPS, the non-federal, no F in there, but non-federal governmental shift. Okay. So, or any other career shift. If you're going non-governmental private sector or any other career shift, it can be done. It does take intention. The reason why it takes intention is because any of you who are hire managers will know this. Employers are very generally risk averse. They're risk averse, right? When they make a hire, they want somebody who can do the job. They want somebody, hopefully, from their sectoral background. They want somebody who's going to minimize their risk where there's not going to be a huge learning curve. Therefore, if you're going to make a shift, and I'll address this a little bit more deeply later on, but I am going to kind of clue you in here that the best way to make a career shift of any sort is to do it through networking. And the reason is that when you show up before your resume, when somebody knows you and trusts you, they are more likely to be able to refer you for what we'll call a creative opportunity, where your background doesn't necessarily line up, right? Check, 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 check. But where there's an opportunity where it's like, wait a second, I know Dominique, I know Julie. You know what? Ashley, my friend over here in the private sector who's in sort of a related community, you know what? I think you should consider Dominique and Julie, and here's why. And they are more likely to open that up and to create a space where that employer can consider you on a creative basis. That's just a little high level. And so as we go through this, how to make the shift, I want you to be thinking about that, because first you have to know what you want to do, wherever you want to do it, what the profession and your community. Then we're going to get very specific in how to use LinkedIn, frankly, to do research on what those other communities might be, what those other lanes might be, who you may want to connect with, right? There's lots of ways to do this, but I'm kind of preparing you for this. All right. So the first thing we want to talk about is knowing your brand, because that's how all of this starts. You got to know who you are and where you're going. And there are three sections here that I want to talk about. And the first is your superpowers. So you all have what we in HR love to call knowledge, skills, and abilities. And these are things that you have, gifts and talents that you have developed over the years. And they are everything from your hard skills, you do project management, you do policy analysis, you do event planning, whatever you do, to your abilities to communicate well or think strategically or build community and all the things, right? And all of those can certainly be transferable skills. Now, what I would like to suggest here is that in order for an employer to be able to effectively utilize those superpowers, they need to ideally fall under your lane and community. Here's why. When an employer has a job posting, and again, if you've ever been a hiring manager, you know what I'm talking about. What's at the top? The job title. It's the first thing that they're looking for. Ideally, they want somebody who knows how to do this job. Secondarily, they're thinking about their own community, the industry, mission, or sector that they're from. If they're an environmental nonprofit, hopefully they're looking for someone who comes from the environmental sector. If they're in health and human services, hopefully they're looking for someone who comes from healthcare and so forth. So when you are thinking about your branding, I would first of all encourage you to think about your lane and your community, your current lane, your current community, and whether you want to shift one or the other. And I would also suggest here that because employers are on the risk, right, they're risk averse, they tend to be a little more comfortable if you're going to shift one but not both. One, but not both. If you shift both, they get nervous. So as we're going through some exercises here, I'd like for you to be thinking about, do you want to lean into your lane or do you want to lean into community? I'll give you an example. I literally this morning had a coaching call, as what's one of the things I do is career coaching. And I was talking with an individual who works for a nonprofit, actually a known nonprofit, that's actually a cross-sectoral nonprofit. So this nonprofit works with different sectors. And this individual is in what we call, some of you might know, the MEL community, monitoring, evaluation, and learning. And so he realized that his lane is not just in MEL, but it's in strategic planning and program design and all these things. But he's a cross-community kind of guy, right? He could go in a number of different communities. So he's really going to focus on his lane, not as much as community. Some of you might be really community oriented. You are into humanitarian work or environmental or international development, what have you. And maybe you have opportunities to shift your lane. Okay. So I wanted to sit here for a minute because that's a very important first level. But the next level underneath that is going to be getting into those knowledge, skills, and abilities. That's how you're going to be able to distinguish yourself from other candidates once you have figured out where you want to go. Okay. Now, this exercise is the signature exercise that I use actually in all of my coaching with all of my coaching clients, and I call it Passiontivity. It is a lane exercise. And what I'd like everybody to do is grab a sheet of paper, and I'd like for you to take just 20 seconds here and jot down what you see here, okay? These 4 boxes. Just give you a second to do that. And you're also welcome to take a picture of it. Okay. And I'm going to go through these boxes. Now, let me explain the sort of the backstory here. This is an exercise where we want to help you figure out where you want to lean in to your superpowers, to those skills. In particular, your functional skills, your hard skills, the things you do. Why? Because when you understand what you do, not just how you do it is on the soft skills side, behavioral skills, but what you do, that's going to help you figure out your lane. And your lane is going to be a particular profession. And I have another skill we're going to talk about, technique that we're going to talk about in another slide called ing versus so stay tuned for that. So for now, you're going to be filling this out as follows. So the upper right box is high engagement. These are the functional skills where you are highly skilled and highly motivated, right? You are a rock star at these skills. You know it, everybody knows it, and you love to do this work. Puts a smile on your face, you give discretionary effort, right? Big smiley face emoji. This bottom section, stopgap work, high skill, low motivation. This is work where you are perfectly competent, but truth be told, you tolerate the work. You will do it, you will be a good foot soldier, but it does not get you up on Monday morning. And the only distinction between the upper right and the bottom right is your level of enjoyment, your motivation, your desire to do it. Professional development is in the upper left box, and it breaks down into 2 quadrants, want to and have to. And I define have to as, yeah, I don't want to. Okay. Like I have to, but I don't want to. And they are very different. Okay. So the want to would be areas, skills that you would love to lean into. And one day you'd like it to be in your high engagement box. Have to is, yeah, I know I should be better at X. For example, let's say you're people oriented. You may say, oh, I don't like, I need to be better at managing budgets, right? So that might be your case. So, and the last one is low, which is disengagement. And these are skills that absolutely, totally drain you. Okay. So what I'm going to have you do is very quickly do a 5-minute solo exercise. And all I want you to do for the sake of time right now is complete just the high engagement box, which is the upper right. And you're going to just list the functional skills where you are highly skilled and highly motivated, okay? You're going to complete the remaining boxes for homework, but for purposes of today's call, the high engagement box is really where you need to be, because that's going to help us to repurpose into possibly a different lane if you're looking for that, okay? And then what I'd like you to do is notice any themes about the type of work you enjoy doing. So for example, when I was coaching that individual earlier today, I noticed that in his high engagement box, he kept using terms that were very strategic, very sort of vision oriented. It was strategic planning and program design and all these things. Whereas in his bottom right box for the stopgap, he put in things like, managing budgets and team development and grant writing and things, because he's not really process oriented. He can do it, but he doesn't like operational kinds of work. So look for the themes in your high engagement box. Think about, what are your superpowers? And is there a community where you want to focus that work? So I'm going to go ahead and put 5 minutes on the clock. Go ahead and have at it.
Shira,
Yes, ma'am.
can you just go back to the previous slide so folks can reference it while they're doing the work?
Absolutely. Thank you very much for that. Here we go. All right. I know we have 1 or 2 people who just joined. And so what we're doing is we're focusing on this box in the upper right corner, high engagement, where you are highly skilled and highly motivated to do the work. We're looking specifically at functional skills, where you are functional skills, which are the things that you would actually physically do. We're not looking at behavioral skills. We're not looking at the soft skills. It's just in the high engagement box, just the hard functional skills. So again, take 5 minutes and just fill that box out and just really think about it. You might have half a dozen skills in there, 10 skills. Think about your whole career. You don't have to focus on just your most recent position. All right. So I've got 5 minutes on the clock now, 4 minutes probably at this point, and we'll see you back when we're ready. And then we're going to actually do another exercise and put you in a breakout. All right. So moving right along. Okay. So now you've hopefully done your 5-minute exercise, and I'd like to share with you another tool for your toolkit, and it's going to help you to shift your lane by repositioning your high engagement skills. And this is why I asked you to do high engagement. So the first is what I call ing. And it sounds funny, right? Your ing skill. So when I think of an ing skill, here's an example, writing, right? So you have a lot of ing skills. You've got, event planning, you've got budget management, right? You've got skills that you have amassed over the years, things that have helped you to do your job. And whatever your career has been, whatever your field, you have amassed ing skills. But that is different than what I call your er. Your er is your profession. So writing is the skill, writer is the profession. It's very simple. Event planning, event planner, project management, project manager. The reason why I talk about this at this stage is because as you're thinking about a possible lane shift, and by the way, I'm not saying that you have to shift your lane. Actually, it's much easier if you don't shift your lane. But if you needed to shift your lane, I want you to be thinking about this because it's very, very, very helpful. If you have this new then what you can do is you can look through your skill sets and say, do I have a number of ing related skills that can help me transfer into an profession? Let me give you a perfect example. So many years ago, I was working with a gentleman who was an attorney. And let's just say he wanted to become a recovering attorney, right? He didn't want to be an attorney anymore. And he decided he wanted to be a writer. Well, how do you turn an attorney into a writer? Well, attorneys do a lot of writing, right? So I looked at his resume and I said, all right, let's pull out all of the different skills, the writing skills that he did in his legal writing, recreate his resume. Of course, we can't change his titles, but we highlighted all of his writing skills, actually exclusively highlighted those skills. And then we went to his LinkedIn profile, created an about page. And the about page was really all about his writing, right? Why he liked to write, the kind of writing he did, so forth. He ended up getting a job as a journalist with a legal trade publication. So notice what happened. He shifted his lane. He kept his community. So the lane turned into writing, or writer, rather, and then his community was still legal. So the employer of the legal trade publication said, yes, he understands us. He understands our business challenges. He gets where we're at. Now, today, he's an English teacher. So he was able to bounce out of legal altogether by shifting his lane. Okay. And we've talked already about community, which is the industry mission.
Sure.
How long have I been on mute?
Just seconds.
Oh, good. Okay. So when you put all of these things together, right, you can see that there is a way to do this pivot. But same thing with the community. Okay. So let's just say you want to shift your community. It may be that you have a lane that you are really, really deep in, but in a part of your background, you've had that community or that industry mission or sector exposure. They were a client, they were a constituent, you were, maybe you were a federal employee and you worked with a nonprofit and they were in that sector, whatever it is, but you have some understanding of what that community is about. Their sectoral challenges, their business challenges, the trends, whatever. It may be that you can then repurpose your lane into that community by highlighting your community experience on your resume, on your LinkedIn. And I'm going to go back to the individual I just mentioned earlier that I was coaching this morning. I mentioned he's cross-sectoral. Well, in our conversation this morning, he did mention to me, he happens to have a real passion for workforce development. Makes sense, just the nature of the nonprofits he's worked for. And so we spent a little bit of time there. And I said to him, are you interested in leaning into that particular community? Now, as it turns out, he didn't want to. He decided he wanted to stay cross-sectoral, but he was thinking about it for a minute because he really loved that work. Now, had he said yes, we would have gone through an exercise where we would have pulled out his community-related experience, layered it into his resume, changed his LinkedIn profile, made sure that we were leaning into the community focus. Why? Because when your employer is looking at the resume or when people are looking at your LinkedIn profile, they want to see, right, where you're leaning. It's very, very helpful for them when they're thinking about this shift. Okay, so I've spent a lot of time here because I really want you to get this is possible. It absolutely is a way that you can make this career shift if you need to. And so I mentioned here a few examples: event planning, event planner, so forth and so on. Okay, policy analyst, policy analysis, policy analyst. All right. So now we're actually going to do our first breakout. And I'm going to say that this is going to be 10 minutes. And you're going to assign a time monitor, okay? And you're going to share the following information, okay, with your breakout. If my computer will work, that would be great. Oh my goodness. Here we go. All right. So you're currently, like, what's your profession right now, right? It could be your title. It could be just sort of where you are in your lane. The possible newer lane that you may want to explore and why. And ask your group to help you brainstorm about the potential learning curve that you need. I'm not saying you have to change your lane. You do not. Again, it's easier if you don't. But in case you wanted to, I want you to think about what might be the And by the way, one of the best ways to do that is to go back to your high engagement box in the Passiontivity exercise. Let's say you have 7 different skills there. It may be that one of those ing skills is highlighted to you. You love doing that skill so much, so much, you want to actually change it into an So again, that writer thing, writing of whatever sort, marketing, whatever it is one of your ing skills. And you're like, no, I want to be a marketer. I want to be a writer. I want to be a policy analyst. I want to be, right? That kind of thing. So that's what you're going to do there. And then if you don't want or need to shift lanes, just simply describe the kind of role that you're seeking. And then also notice what themes you notice about your superpowers, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and set up these breakout rooms. What I want to shift now is a little bit into the community conversation, okay? So considering which NGPS or other organizations could benefit from your agency, GovCon, or nonprofit experience. All right, so what I wanted to do here is give you some sample community pivots. Why am I doing this? Because a lot of you come from a governmental sector, right? You work for EPA, you work for TSA, you work for HHS, what have you. Or maybe you're with a GovCon that's in that sector, or you're with an NGO in that sector. And you might be thinking to yourself, how in the world can I shift to a non-federal government private sector company? Well, I put down some samples in here. What I'm going to do is have you we're going to get into LinkedIn and do a real practical exercise for how you can figure this out. But I just wanted to give you some samples, right? So you're in the environmental sector and maybe you want to go into an environmental engineering firm. You're in transportation, maybe you want to go into airports. In fact, the reason why I came up with that particular one, there's this lady that I go to church with, and she works for TSA. And she was literally sharing with me a couple weeks ago. She goes, I'm going to try to flip into the airport that I work for. I'm like, well, that's so smart, right? I want you to be thinking creatively about the flip side of the agency or the nonprofit that you or GovCon that you work for, and who might be appropriate. I did want to mention for our international development community, I know we of course have many, many of them, that there are for-profits, and I know Susan Nickbarg, who's on this call, plays very much in this space in the, I'm going to broadly call it the corporate social responsibility world. I know there are many names for it, ESG, and Susan's actually quite the expert on the topic. But there are international, what we call B Corps. Ben & Jerry's is a very good example of that, where it's a for-profit company, but it has a lot of sort of social mission, social venture kind of a thing. Might be very interesting for people who are in the international development world or impact investing. So I'm just giving you some examples, of course, that there's no way that I could cover everything here, but this is just to give you some ideas.